Hey everybody, getting a late start on a Friday of May 21st, 2021, but it is time for another Let's Build Citizen live stream, so let's get started. YouTube was telling me I was having a bad connection, so I'm trying a wired connection through my USB-C for the first time. We'll see how the bandwidth goes. Audio coming through. Looks like, yep. Hey, good. Alright, so making steady progress here. I'm going to basically spend a day doing some of the more straightforward tech work. Part of the reason I was kind of late starting is I'm doing some brainstorming around execution decisions in terms of the product, like the UX, UI kind of stuff. I haven't resolved on anything, but I'm thinking about things like trust graphs, thinking about things like distributed moderation, stuff like that. We will get to that in the future, though. For now, we're going to keep on cranking on the basics of the application, making sure everything works. I think, to be honest, one of the best things we could do, I've got some ideas about how communities should work, but at this stage I'm not 100% sure that it's going to stay in. I'm thinking we're going to go ahead and disable communities for now. I'm going to hold on to the code. Either I'm going to remove it from the repo, and we'll have it in the Git history. I have a very notable commit where I'm removing it so it's easy to restore, or I'm just going to put it all dormant because I think we got to stay focused on the core piece of this thing, and then bring in sophistication once we kind of understand what the product UX is going to be. I know we've been going back and forth on that, but I'm just not sure communities are where we want to be spending our time up front. So yeah, I'm thinking we may go ahead and disable that for now. So what we do have on our plate is wrapping up the updates to usernames and database keys, which I think is actually pretty close to done. If we disable communities for now, then we'll pretty much be done with almost all methods. I mean, I'm kind of moving along in that. We got the new blobs API to do, so I'll probably get started on that today as well. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna, again, may end up restoring this right away, may end up restoring it at some point in the future, but for now I'm gonna strip out communities. I know that's not gonna be popular with everybody, but I want to go back to ground zero and then decide whether or not communities make sense for this new reapproach we're taking. And if they don't, then we shouldn't bring them in. And if they do, it'd be easy to bring them back in. Hey, Nish. Yeah, nah, I just started late today. that's that.
CTZN.
So with that, I believe all of our methods are implemented. And now let's get the blobs API going. Updates to this thing. So blobs, we're going to switch up how they're implemented just a bit here. The way the blobs currently work, it's kind of an arbitrary namespace of blobs that a database might have, and we're going to be creating a one-to-one attachment between records in the Hyper-B tables and blobs so that we can take advantage of when a record gets deleted, we know to decache that record, that blob. Also enables us to tie together the API so that you can upload a blob whenever you update a record, in one request, which I hope make life a little easier in certain cases. I hope. Maybe. But certainly it helps with permissions and namespace management as well as the caching decisions. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's think about this. Maybe the way we want to do this is still use a separate API. At the end of the day, the most important change is just that we set up the blobs to be addressed by a table record key, so they're attached to a record. And then delete the blobs when the records are deleted. That's really the most important thing. Let me think. How do I want to structure this? Hey, Melanie. Good to see you. Hey, Lorenzo. So I'm just making an update to the blobs to make blobs attached to specific records, which I think is important for decaching, as well as helps with permissions and namespace management. This to-do right here, track which ranges are actively pointed to and cache decache accordingly. We can now do that. One of those things, wrapping it into the rework. We can also get our schemas to spec expectations around the the blobs, you know, MIME types or sizes, things like that. So that's all good news. Okay, I think that's good. So then the API. Alright, so that's the get API for Bob. Use the bathroom real quick. Add a little nav plan over here. Way less simple to crop on OBS than I prefer. Maybe I can modify. There we go. Alright, so we're handling file uploads here. Let's see what the right way to do this is. Express. I think you're supposed to use middleware for that. Alright, and then that just leaves one other method to support, which is deleting a blob. That was pretty easy. Alright, now let's do a little searching around in our code base here to make sure that all the code's been updated properly. Alright, let's see where that puts us. Okay, there's something going on with put blob. Let's step through it. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. All the way to the end, huh? What are we bombing out? Something about put blob, it's not finishing up. Seems a lot like the HTTP API is finishing up. Oh no, I'm not responding. That's a little trick from the biz. Make sure you respond. Alright. Alright, so getBuff came back with bad request. Let's see what happened there. Alright, we're getting close. We're just missing a toString method. I got P again. I don't know what's going on with me. Be right back. You know, I don't know if I gotta necessarily do this. Just need to compare the buffers. There's a simple way to do that. Really nice if array buffers, you know, had some of the tools that like Node.js buffers have. Not asking for a lot here. There we go. All right. Now we just need a couple of. Well, what we really need is to have a set of blobs tests and. See about applying validation. No, that's a shame. Looks like we actually are not going to be able to do. Well, let's take a look and see what API we got. It's looking a little bit like Hyperspace and exporting us a clear command on the Hypercore. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. Well, that's going to have to be to do. That's a shame. Okay. Alright, now we gotta think about how our schemas are going to spec this. I'm thinking we're going to do it like this. Got the definition, and now we're going to add like a blobs. And it'll be like avatar, max size, and then you'll do what were we doing by default before? Config 500 kilobytes. That's how it'll go on profiles and on posts. I think the way we're going to have to do this is just specing them one by one. This will be something along the lines of like inherently means that you're only allowed to get 6 images of a post now. Which seems fine to me. I mean, we're talking 512 kilobytes each, so 3 megabyte post, 3.5 megs, and they consider the content. We'll want to rework how the media works over here a little bit. You got the original size as well. Something to think about. We'll come back to that in the future, though. For now, I'm thinking go to our schemas and we introduce a way to validate blobs. All right. May actually not be needed here. Let's go over to the Alright, let's see what we got. So where my scheme is. Which one? Post. Red line 33 bombed out on us. How big is this test image? 5 kilobytes, that ain't the problem. Might be that my type's wrong. That'll do it. Doesn't seem to have solved it. It's a good buffer that's bombing. Okay. glove or get glove pointer, one of the two. I'm tab missing somehow. That would be it. Stop put. Hey Michael, how's it going, man? go. Hell yeah, man, me too. I'm just futzing around with our blobs API a little bit right now. Getting validation of the blobs into the schemas and attaching the blobs to the schemas. So like individual records now have blobs attached to them, which means we can put validation into our schemas, which is good. It also means that we know when to delete the blobs, because their schemas will get deleted. Or their records, rather. So, slightly better blobs implementation. And I think we just got it good to go. Yep. I also decided that for now, I decided to remove the communities API. It's in our commit history. We can bring it back when we want to, but I want to stay focused right now and make sure that we're building out from first principles. Hey, Slytherin. So now, if you look on like a profile avatar, you can now specify things like blobs, saying the max size and the allowed MIME types. Similar thing with posts. You got the attached media right there. So now we got more rigor on our schemas on that front as well. Things are getting hella rigorous around here. All right, I think that covers it. Yeah. We're doing a fairly significant rework of the entire application, the architecture, the APIs, the execution, moving from federated to mesh-based, 100% mesh-based as opposed to a hybrid like we were doing before. We're doing a lot. If you want to get an overview of the architecture rework, watch Monday's stream playback and you can see what's going on. Yeah, y'all want me to give another overview of that, or you want to just go watch the playback on Monday? I'm happy to do either one, because I'm about to finish up the task here.
CTZN.
Alright, so authenticating across the mesh. the way that gets relevant is if you have some kind of data set or something that you want to operate on that is not managed by the instance that you're using, whether that's a desktop application or a service. And in some cases, what we're going to have is multi-writer involved, so that basically will mean you have write access to that data set. That's easy. But for things like, there's going to be things along the lines of like remote joins, like we were dealing with communities, though, like I said, I stripped out communities for now to keep it simple. But you got other similar things. Just general push messaging from instance to instance is going to have to become a requirement of the mesh. That's something that the protocol guys tell me that they're interested in developing out. So it's looking like the Hypercore protocol is going to have a RPC, distributed RPC system, and there will be an authentication layer within that. So that's how that's going to work out. And that'll end up being probably pretty important for things. I mean, we're going to need a whole push messaging system for like notifications and what have you. So yeah, it's fair to say that a lot of the updates that we're doing here are related to the improvements that the Hypercore protocol team have slated or put into place. I would say probably we'll start to see some of that work in the next few weeks, but it will start to stabilize in the span of 1 to 6 months. Yeah, we'll have to kind of feel out how we want to push things forward in relationship to what they're doing. Meanwhile, the way user addressing is going to work is that you can use usernames to relate to people that are on the same instance as you, but otherwise you use their pub keys, which puts it in a similar situation as the IPFS gateway, where you can access things just across the mesh using their cryptographic IDs. And I suspect we're going to be getting some kind of authentication / identity, identity layer baked into the application at some point, I would bet, to do things like identity proofs like Keybase did. Kind of feels like where this will end up heading. It's a lot less necessary with multi-writer, but there's still some interesting questions around that. If you want your pub key to not change whenever your multi-writer set changes, then you're going to need to have a private, probably have some kind of like master hypercore, which is specifically designed to just indicate who the writers are. And because we can do feed truncation now, I'm kind of thinking the way we deal with that is that you just transfer the private key if you ever decide to leave the service that's actually managing that, and then rehoming in that case, because there'll be a lot more flexibility about where the access points are with multi-writer. We'll probably handle rehoming just like an account change, like you lost your private key. All right, gotta create a new account. Is it not glue to the edges? Come on. Alright, it's the stupid, snap to edges kind of stuff that I'm constantly fighting with. Like, I know it's helpful, but is it though? You're killing me. Alright, let's pop through some of our tests here. I guess, it's end of the week. Why don't I do a quick review of everything that's happened here, API-wise. I mean, the API has gotten a whole lot simpler in a lot of ways. This is the full API surface. Yeah. Yeah, so you got your table accessor here, list, get a blob off of a record, create a record, update a record, put a blob onto a record, delete a record, delete a blob in a record, get a view, run a method. Methods sort of took the idea of database methods, but got rid of them being on the in the database, so no more DB method action for now. And that's on account of the mesh RPC. So the mesh RPC will end up replacing the DB methods. And so instead we're just going to have kind of a method premise. But because it's similar to database methods now, all methods will have schemas. And so now if you look inside of our schemas folder, it's actually in many ways a lot more interesting to look at. Because it's better organized for one, but for two, it includes methods as well. So now it's organized into methods views and then the actual table schemas. The table schemas now include definitions of the blobs that they include. And your methods, you got basically any kind of API that doesn't boil down to reading and writing tables. So change password, log in, log out, register, stuff like that. Mark your notifications red. Do a who am I, anything that would be related to communities like we had before would be baked into there. These are really just typical HTTP APIs. They're just now have schemas to them, so they're all well defined. So we just have a unbelievably well specified set of APIs, which is great. I'm really stoked about that. And then views are the same as before. These are anything which you're out of here now. Let me get that in there.
CTZN.
So yeah, the views are any kind of read off of the database, which are involving some kind of computation on behalf of the server. And that's so pretty much you can look at all these schemas and get a pretty strong sense of everything that this server is capable of doing. And that means that in a lot of ways, the server implementation that we have here, all the stuff that's implemented in this API and what have you, is the sort of thing that we can actually extract out into a framework to be reused. And so we're going to end up wanting to come up with a name for this mesh design, which encompasses this kind of API and this design of service, along with the approach to using Hyper-V. Come up with some kind of name for that, like the Hypercore mesh database protocol, something like that. And then CTZN will just be an application on that. And we'll probably take that framework and use it to implement the Hypercore personal data server as well. So nice generic tool set, and with some custom servers, some generic ones in the case of the personal data server. So that's all rocking. That's all doing pretty good here. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, what I'm pretty excited about here is the degree to which this all got a lot more elegant. It's really simpler to, yeah, everything has a schema. It's all super well defined, all machine readable, which is important, I think, for creating an extensible data mesh, an extensible applications network that's decentralized in the way that we want it to be. But you know, really the most important thing is it's just a whole lot more elegant, I think. It's good for security, and it's good for compatibility. That was one of the main things that motivated this, not just having well-defined schema IDs with the URLs, but actually having machine-readable schemas, is that now you just have this very strong guarantee when you're interacting with any data set or any method, that if you got, you know, spec compliance is a clear and actually easy thing to do. When you're reading data out of the network, you can expect it to be following the schema. Schemas will change, so there will be some considerations along those lines. But usually, you know, the designers of schemas have to be careful not to do breaking changes on deployed systems. They have to pretty much always stick to only additions that are non-breaking. So then the whole system just is much cleaner and simpler to work with. Which is one of the things I came to decide after working in this space for quite some time. It's just like, you know what? Schema, compatibility, and definition. It's one of those things you don't really want to. You want to tool it really well. You know what I mean? Like, not just have a nice conventional system. You want the tooling to really help you. And it's pretty easy to conceive of how, because we have these machine-readable schemas with URLs to look them up, it's pretty conceivable to be able to do something like tell your personal data store to fetch the schema definitions and then boom, install new databases, things like that, new applications. You also have a very clear ownership of the schemas. There's going to be some organization that's holding on to that domain name, choosing what's getting published there. That's a pretty important part of it as well, I think. You really, if you don't have that, then consensus about the schemas ends up becoming a non-trivial problem. And this will also be really good for permissions in the future, kind of situation where you're doing a single sign-on flow and something saying, I want to be able to access the following tables. Those schemas will actually be able to include information to tell the user what they're trying to access. So things like, okay, this thing wants to edit your posts or see your posts or whatever, you know. So that's all good as well. I'm going to hold off on comments for now. Actually, I'm going to hold off on the rest of these tests because I got to think about the next thing to think about here. It's not a huge deal, but more than I feel like doing a 5 o'clock on a Friday, I'm already been kind of did a lot of mental work today, so or this week rather. So I'm kind of out of juice already, but. From here, we got to think about how to do things like follows and threads and reactions and notifications index-wise. I think I'm pretty sure how it's going to work, but in fact, I've got listed there. Probably the follows, threads, and reactions will be indexed by the server. while notifications, the results of that indexing will probably get put into tables on the user database. You mean Michael, like prior to working on schema? Because I've been working on a JSON schema since the beginning of Citizen. Are you thinking like back in like earlier, prior to Citizen kind of stuff, me avoiding using them? Yeah. I never avoided JSON schema because I didn't like JSON schema. I've always been pretty cool with it. If I was avoiding anything, it was avoiding machine-readable schemas. Because prior to Citizen, yeah. I mean, I was trying to split the difference between having conventional systems that are, at the end of the day, what I've always been thinking about is a combination of developer experience and user experience. And the general thinking was, well, developers hate futzing with schemas, so try to make it as conventional as possible, make life easy for them. And I went with that assumption for a long time. Ultimately, I realized that poorly defined schemas in an open network is actually developer hostile. That was the shift in my thinking. It was never really a problem with JSON schema per se. It was more about trying to make sure that the UX and the DX, the developer experience, were both as good as possible. And ultimately realizing that, it's going to get best as possible if we get well-defined schemas in there. So that's how that went down. So a lot of the changes to the project that are been kicked in this week have a lot to do with architectural stuff. It has to do with focusing the value prop on, all right, it's a mesh network, a pure mesh network, no longer a federated hybrid. And rather than the application being separated from the service, we're going to instead think of the value prop as having a personal data server that can tie in with the service with multi-writer. And now you have a real data ownership narrative where you can start on some application without thinking about any of this, and then at some point be like, what, I really want to take advantage of this data ownership, spin up a personal data server, and migrate your data, or start to dual replicate it, and then if you ever decide to screw that service, you can just pop off of it, right? So that, and then, just having this whole open, the patterns that we're using here being the basis for an applications network makes it an interesting developer platform, and there you have it, right? Kind of at the same time, a lot of what we're doing here is scoping down the features inside of the Citizen application itself. And from here, we got to think about how to move forward. What features do we want, which ones we don't. And a lot of my initial ideas when we were starting out Citizen with moderation and things like that kind of got jammed up. The approach to communities, I mentioned this a couple times, but I'll go through it again. The approach to communities was by and large kind of connected to the idea that there were no unmoderated spaces, and the communities would be a mechanism by which people would be connecting with each other. So you only got notifications if you were in a community with somebody or if you followed them. The major change with this architectural change is that we're going to go ahead and get push messaging in there. So now you can get notifications from anybody using the push messaging network. And then you can choose to kind of tune it down if you want to, but the mechanisms will no longer be hard tied to that kind of topology. With the change like that, then communities becomes less important. Meanwhile, on a user experience level, the communities, at the end of the day, all the ideas I had around making a kind of like customizable algorithms and customizable approaches to moderation, I kind of realized it's actually going to be really hard to make a system where you can have customizable moderation. Coming up with all sorts of different schemes. This one will use upvotes and downvotes, and this one will use something else. Turns out, it's hard on all kinds of levels. You got to implement all these different mechanisms. You got to come up with custom user interfaces for each of the different mechanisms. Now your application's getting complicated. None of it really played out the way that I wanted. And the default way that we were kind of leaning towards when it came to communities was just there being moderators. As it turns out, not only does everybody hate being moderated, as you might expect, but it actually sucks to be a moderator. I had to moderate one person, and by the end of that thing, I was exhausted. Not to mention, I was starting to think about, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to have to sit there and be the one in charge of whether or not everybody's having a good time. So the entire approach of having a shared space that has to be moderated like that, that's not working for me. So when it comes to moderation and curation, it kind of came down to, you know what? The tooling needs to be enhancing, or kind of like, you got to, let's distribute the decision making around this so there's not one person that's getting the job. I agree about that, CS. So yeah, get away from any person having the job, distribute the decision making, and then look for ways to harness collective action on both moderation and curation. And so I'm kind of leaning towards something along the lines of a trust graph plus voting, or something like that. Or maybe a trust graph plus other kinds of signals. Kind of thing where you got the people you follow, you do friend of a friend expansions out. Maybe you add some sophistication to it depending on how big your trust graph is getting, where it can do energy flow computation similar like PageRank or Appleseed. May not be necessary, but you just do expansions out on the social graph, and you leverage that to have some sense of, if you're doing a voting system, what you don't want are sock puppets and things like that, so you use a trust graph. That way you have some kind of control over it. I'm thinking that's how we're going to approach that. So thinking about exactly, how the moderation and curation side of that is, curation being up votes, moderation being down votes. Do we do it just straight like that, or do we want to come up with something that's a little more kind of clever? But overly complicated UX is a thing to worry about as well, So I'm that's what I was noodling on this morning, and that's what I'm going to be thinking about as we go here. With the communities, I still think it's an interesting idea to have basically social accounts, social media accounts, citizen accounts that are actually collectives of people that are submitting posts and then coming to some decision-making process about what actually gets posted, and then when it gets posted by the account itself and not by the users. I think that's a neat idea. Haven't really cooked up in my head how that would work yet, though. Also debating, do we want to get in, bake into the software any kind of topical separations? Maybe. Again, it's a trade-off of complexity versus value. Do you want to have to mark on your post that this is about coding? Or do you just want to be able to make a post? But that's what I'm noodling on now. Maybe the sort of thing where the best thing to do at the outset is just to keep it simple, I feel less pressure to do things like blog posts and pages because we no longer have to have one application that encompasses all possible behavior or all possible content. It's a lot less about that now. So I don't know, I got mixed feelings. A lot of social media applications really get anchored to what the phone makes a pleasant experience, because that's how most people are using social media. So I'm not really sure yet. I'm also kind of thinking about, I got a list, an item here, like comments versus reply posts. Do we want to do Reddit style comments, or do we want to do Twitter style reply posts? Still thinking about that, kind of depends on whether or not you do things like retweets. So that's where I'm at with extended posts as well, as I'm kind of thinking all right, do we want to have extended posts? Do we want to keep things simpler UX wise? There's definitely aspects of extended posts. I like the extended text in the post pretty well, but I don't know. We'll think about it. The other thing is, you know, when you start getting into like extended posts and blog posts and pages, you also got to start thinking about rich text. And it would be nice to be able to pull out the HTML requirement from the spec to keep this application simpler. So, just not sure yet. All the features or ideas that we've been futzing with, all that we just talked about, and also like items and that kind of stuff, can all come back at any time. You know, it's just kind of like, let's scope it all down, let's look at it all again, build our way back outward, make sure that we're not letting any carryover feature from before slow us down in ways that really doesn't make sense. That's better. So now what I got to think about, what I got next up is thinking about the secondary indexes. Probably follows, threads, and reactions will get indexed by the server in the server database, which is the most expedient approach. The notifications will actually probably write the notification results inside of the user's individual databases. The trade-off on that is everything is faster, usually if you just write to the server database and read from the server database, but with any of the data that you want to have be portable between different instances of the Citizen application, you're going to want to write those records out to the user's database so that it transfers cleanly for them. Yeah, that's a good idea, Michael. I mean, like I said, at the end of this, it should be a framework. And if this thing is working real well, which I think it will, by the end of the development of the mesh network framework that's separate from Citizen's, what Citizen built on top of, it should be like a weekend project kind of thing. Just a nice Node.js framework for building applications that hands you a lot of the pieces, including, of course, your database layer. You just plug in your own set of schemas, your own front end, and you're ready to go. And now you're on the mesh, you got a service. So, in a really ideal world, weekend project. Alright, I don't think I'm going to do any more work today. Another short one, but good stuff. Glad to get the blob stuff done. Anybody have anything else they want to bring up before I call it up? Call it a day? Any other questions, anything like that? Well, hey, if it's a statement less about talent and more about how good the tools are, you know. Hopefully, the tools are so good that it actually is. Blogging in particular, man. Come on. I guess it's front end work you got to do and stuff. Point being, it shouldn't be any worse than, in fact, should in some ways be easier than if you were to sit down with Node.js and, you know, try to build out a blogging service that way, you know. And I mean, if this thing's working, it's the kind of thing where, like, that framework for building out these mesh services should include all of the mechanisms for doing things like, you know, user accounts. It's got HTTP endpoints all set up for you, just Express, you know. Just kind of like plug in your front end, plug in your schemas, plug in any custom indexing you need. You're all set, you know. TinyMCE, man, or that new thing that I found that somebody shared on the stream. That one's the one I like now, TipTap. That one's pretty dope. TipTap's pretty sweet. I think that may be my new recommendation. All that work. Didn't end up using it. What can you do? Yeah. Way more so. Before we were doing a hybrid P2P and federated, now we're just doing straight P2P. I mean, you still use it. You can still use servers. It's like a now it's kind of like if you're familiar with the IPFS gateway, you know, it's kind of like running gateways. But as a service that actually can do application work for you. Yeah, a little bit, but you still got the super nodes are kind of baked in now. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't run on your own device. The default implementation is an HTTP hosted service. That can maintain your keys on your account and will do aggregation on some level for you. So there's it's similar to how Beaker Social worked, but you got the super nodes well defined now. You know, that's the service instances. That's where it makes sense. You too. Hope all you have a great weekend. I just had a friend schedule the first party, post-pandemic party for not next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the one after one. So I'm excited about that. So I hope y'all are starting to have, wherever you are, a little bit of a relaxation of all that nonsense. It's been a tough week. Work-wise here. I've been streaming less and thinking more and dealing with difficult problems, but the results are coming out real great. I'm pretty excited about what we're doing here. So hopefully by next week I'll be full of energy again, ready to tackle all this stuff, get the front end back into a good place. Maybe I'll have some answers on this question like the trust graph and distributed curation / moderation. So good stuff. All right, have a great weekend, y'all. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. I will see you all on Monday, and that's that. Catch you later.